Let's chat today about grief groups. Grief groups, those support groups that many seek out after they have gone through a loss. When I lost my husband many years ago, I went to one grief support group. It was pretty much the only one in my area, and I was by far the youngest person there. I was 33 years old, and nobody could identify. Nobody had been through the situation I had been through where there was no body to be recovered. But these were all people with adult children, empty nesters, and I had two little boys. And I remember how deflated I felt when I left that meeting thinking, is there anything out there for me? And thank goodness, the church that we were attending at the time, we had a friend there who had a friend. And she told me about this group that her friend was a part of because her friend's husband he was a naval officer, naval flight officer, whose plane went down. I think it was in the Ionian Sea. And so she connected us, and that was the beginning of the WIDS. And we were actually a pretty large group. It was overwhelmingly Navy widows whose husbands had been killed in various air crashes, either in combat or in training. And then there was myself, and then later our token male, whose first wife was killed in just one of the worst commercial airline disasters on American soil. And, I remember we would come together at different people's houses. And in the initial stages, we would cry, we would talk about our kids. We talked a lot about just having to navigate the whole legal process. They were dealing with the military. I was having to go through a 1-year process of having my husband declared dead. And then my other friend was involved with the National Transportation and Safety Board and airlines and the FAA, other things. So we talked a lot about that. And then, life went on. People got engaged. We're dating people, and we would celebrate that. But looking back, I don't remember us being parked there in a place of grief for very long. We bonded over other things, our children, our jobs, what we were having to navigate in the process of the business that unfortunately accompanies death. And, it makes me really happy to see so many programs now. Grief Share is a very popular one that is hosted at a lot of churches. And that's a national program. I've actually looked at their book, their workbook, and it's a really great book. One of my regular yoga students started going to one at a church in the area last year, and she was very excited to share that book with me. And it really is a great book. Here's what I have realized, though, about grief groups that I've popped in on here and there, and I've spoken to quite a few. Sometimes we can become our grief. Sometimes we can become our grief. And what I mean by that is it becomes our identity. Just like someone going through cancer treatment, one of my least favorite expressions, and I've actually very lovingly called friends out who have been on a healing journey in cancer. Don't call it your cancer. People saying my cancer. I'm like, no, it's an invader. Treat it as an invader. But the same thing for grief. People can become their grief. And depending on what the grief group is like, it can be really easy for people just to get stuck. And then all they talk about is their loss for years. Now, with the 12-step programs like AA or NA, Narcotics Anonymous, or Overeaters Anonymous, what have you, I get why people are in those groups maybe for the rest of their lives, because there is some type of addiction and they do not want to fall back into that and they need the support. But when it comes to grief, we want to heal. Sure, we want to feel our grief. It's important. You have to face it. You can't just sweep it under the rug. But be careful if you go through a period of loss and you join a grief support group that you do not become your grief and that becomes your whole social life. With the WIDS, we all eventually just dispersed. People moved away, people got married, and there was a core group of us that stayed in this area who remain great friends. In fact, one of them is getting married. First time since she lost her husband 30 some years ago. She's getting married next month. And several of us will be there celebrating with her. And I'm really excited about that. Be careful that your grief does not become your identity. That's my message. That's the bottom line. There's a lot of life to live. We have this one life. That's my opinion. Or my personal opinion. I know a lot of people believe in multiple lives. I don't. And it's important to live our lives. It's important to move on, to heal, and to savor what life has to give us. Of course, we want to honor the people that we have lost, but at some point you have to move on. So remember that. If you're a part of a grief group, be careful not to become your grief and to let that become your identity. I hope you have a really great day, and I hope you have a really great week.